Beyond the prognosis, defying medical expectations. Three words changed everything. You have cancer. Three words that feel like a period at the end of a sentence, a full stop, the end of a story. But what I've learned from my recent conversation with Roniy Scott, a visionary health advocate whose work has transformed thousands of lives by challenging conventional narratives around terminal illness, is that those three words aren't a period, they're a comma. A pause before the next chapter begins. When I sat down with Roniy, I expected to hear stories of struggle. Instead, I encountered something revolutionary, stories that completely redefine what it means to receive a terminal diagnosis, stories that shatter our expectations about what's possible when medical science says impossible. Roniy doesn't just talk about hope, she embodies it, channeling it into practical frameworks that have helped countless individuals reclaim their agency in the face of devastating news. The truth is, we've been conditioned to believe certain narratives about illness, that a diagnosis is destiny, that statistics determine our fate, that some battles simply can't be won. But here's the uncomfortable truth: these narratives serve the system more than they serve the patient. They create neat categories, manageable expectations, and convenient endpoints. They allow medical professionals to distance themselves from the messy, unpredictable nature of human resilience. Let me be clear: I'm not suggesting doctors are villains in this story. Far from it. They're working within a framework that's been constructed over centuries, a framework that, despite its many miracles, still struggles to account for outliers, for the stubborn survivors who refuse to follow the script, people like KKs. In 1994, Kay received a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest forms with devastatingly low survival rates. The doctors told her she was inoperable, not once, but multiple times over 3 decades. 3 decades. Yes, you heard that correctly. KK's has survived pancreatic cancer for over 31 years. When she first experienced severe back pain that led to her diagnosis, the medical establishment essentially wrote her off. But Kay refused to accept that narrative. She sought out clinical trials. She partnered closely with Dr. Daniel von Hoff. She underwent targeted therapies and multiple surgeries as new treatments emerged. Imagine being told there's nothing we can do and responding, that's not acceptable to me. Imagine the courage that requires, the audacity, the sheer force of will. Today, Kay isn't just surviving, she's thriving as an outspoken patient advocate who has helped raise awareness for early detection and inspired countless others facing terminal diagnoses. Think about that for a moment. A woman who, according to medical statistics, should have died decades ago, is now helping others navigate their own impossible journeys. This isn't just a feel good anomaly. This is evidence of something profound that Roniy Scott emphasized throughout our conversation. Your diagnosis is not your destiny. Let that sink in for a moment. Your diagnosis is not your destiny. A terminal illness does not define the length or quality of your life. Surpassing medical expectations isn't just possible, it's happening every day to people who refuse to be reduced to a statistic. But how? What's the secret? Roniy pointed to something that emerged in every survival story: the transformative power of hope paired with fierce self advocacy. Consider Danielle and Sasha, two women diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer, glioblastoma. Instead of facing their journeys alone, they found community by supporting each other during treatment trials. They participated together in clinical programs while providing mutual emotional support throughout chemotherapy and radiation. The result? Both women have celebrated more than a decade cancer free. But here's what's truly remarkable: they didn't stop at their own healing. They became mentors to new survivors through the Imerman Angels support program. They became speakers at survivor events, creating ripple effects within survivor communities nationwide by sharing practical advice and emotional encouragement. What's fascinating about their story isn't just that they survived against the odds, it's that they understood something fundamental about human resilience. We heal better together. When Danielle and Sasha first entered treatment, they felt isolated, overwhelmed by the uncertainty of experimental protocols. But in finding each other, they discovered a power greater than medicine alone could provide: the power of shared experience, of being truly seen in your suffering. Their story illustrates the second key insight from my conversation with Roniy Scott. Hope and advocacy transform outcomes. When you embrace hope, seek support, and advocate fiercely for yourself, you can shift outcomes dramatically. Connecting with others who understand your journey fosters a resilience that empowers healing in ways medical science is only beginning to understand. But let's be real for a moment. The journey isn't always straightforward. Sometimes surviving one challenge leads to another. Susan's story exemplifies this complexity. After receiving a cancer diagnosis, Susan faced not only the battle against her disease, but also developed a massive opioid dependency following her treatment journey. She was fighting on two fronts: against cancer and against addiction. Many would consider this a double death sentence. But Susan reclaimed control over her life using accelerated neuroregulation therapy alongside holistic approaches. She emerged healthy on both fronts, becoming an inspiration as someone who triumphed not only over disease, but also addiction stigma. What's particularly powerful about Susan's journey is how she transformed her suffering into service. Today, she's outspoken about sharing what she calls her miracle daily so that others know recovery is possible even under dual burdens. Her story brings us to the third profound insight from my conversation with Roniy Scott. We must learn to live out loud, to walk in love regardless of circumstance. When Susan chose to communicate from a place of authenticity, letting her story inspire others to persevere through their own challenges, she transformed her suffering into purpose. This is the pattern I saw emerging from every story Roniy shared. These weren't just tales of survival, they were testimonies of transformation, of people who refused to be defined by their diagnosis and instead defined themselves by how they responded to it. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. These are exceptional cases, medical miracles. They don't represent the norm. And you're right. They don't represent the norm. They represent what's possible when we reject the limitations others place upon us. I'm not suggesting we deny medical reality or abandon conventional treatment. What I am suggesting, what Roniy Scott so powerfully conveyed, is that we expand our definition of what's possible. Statistics tell us what happens to populations. They don't dictate what happens to individuals. Every single one of these survivors faced moments of despair. Kay was told multiple times that her cancer was inoperable. Danielle and Sasha entered treatment feeling isolated and uncertain about experimental protocols. Susan battled debilitating pain management issues on top of fighting cancer itself. But they all made a critical choice. They chose to believe that their story wasn't over. They chose to advocate fiercely for themselves. They chose to connect with others who could support their journey. And perhaps most importantly, they chose to transform their suffering into service. This is what it means to live beyond the prognosis. It means recognizing that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. It means understanding that healing isn't just about physical recovery, it's about emotional, spiritual, and communal restoration as well. As Ronnie Scott emphasized, this journey isn't about denying reality, it's about expanding it. It's about recognizing that medical science, for all its advances, still doesn't fully understand the complex interplay between mind, body, spirit, and community in the healing process. So I stand before you today with a challenge to fundamentally rethink how we approach illness, diagnosis, and healing in our lives. When you or someone you love receives a diagnosis that feels like the end of the road, remember KK's, who turned inoperable into 31 years of vibrant living. Remember Danielle and Sasha, who transformed isolation into community. Remember Susan, who fought battles on multiple fronts and emerged victorious on all of them. Your diagnosis, whatever it may be, is not the end of your story. It's a plot twist, a call to adventure, an invitation to discover strengths you never knew you had. I challenge you to become a medical rebel, not by rejecting treatment, but by rejecting limitations, by asking uncomfortable questions, by seeking second, third, and fourth opinions, by connecting with others who've walked similar paths, by demanding to be seen as a whole person, not just a collection of symptoms. I challenge you to rewrite the cultural script around illness, to speak about your journey with honesty, but also with hope, to share your struggles, but also your triumphs, to normalize the idea that statistics are starting points, not endings. And if you're a medical professional, I challenge you to make space for possibility in your practice, to recognize that your most valuable tool might not be your technical expertise, but your willingness to partner with patients in their quest for healing. Because here's what I've learned from Roniy Scott and the remarkable survivors she's introduced me to. When we refuse to be defined by our diagnosis, when we advocate fiercely for ourselves and others, when we transform our suffering into service, we don't just change our own stories. We change the story of what's possible for everyone who comes after us. And that might be the most powerful medicine of all.